Hello everybody, how's it going? So I work for Kantar in an innovation role, so I guess I would be talking about proximity beacons. We've done quite a lot of work with them, and I guess I thought I'd share some of the findings. So I guess before I talk about the technology, my first test was actually going to Macy's. I'd heard that they have actually rolled out beacons in their store, and I've got a little beacon scanner, so I went through the first 3 floors and saw none, and I was sort of telling myself, if I don't find any beacons in Macy, I'm probably just going to get on the plane and go home. This technology is not going to happen. But I was on the 5th floor, and there was probably about 20 beacons in play there, basically around the high-end fashion brands, which was like a real relief. So in terms of the technology, I thought I'd just go through what they are and how they work. They're very simple devices, so they've got one function and sort of one function only. They just send out a ping, a constant ping, which announces their presence. So like each beacon has a unique ID. Some systems we can sort of name them, you can send URLs out, but generally it's just sending this ping, and it gives you a little bit of information also about the signal strength, so you can use analytics and I guess to work out proximity. The other thing you can see, the first version of these things, and this is definitely the first version, and there's thousands of them in the room next door, they're all battery. And the first batch I got of these things, the battery was supposed to last for 2 years, and by the time I got around to testing them a month later, they'd all run out. So and I've heard the same from quite a few other people. So where do they fit into the proximity toolkit? I guess if you're doing mobile research, you should really be thinking about proximity. It's the one key thing. I think actually there's 2 key things with mobile. One is time, and the other one is proximity. If you're not looking at the time someone's responding, and you're not looking at the proximity, I think you're missing out on most of the insight, and it's concerning. So just to give an example and follow someone's trip, let's say to buy a handbag in this case. So first of all, in terms of technology, you might be looking at cell IDs, and that'll narrow someone down to like a kilometre. Then GPS even further, so you might know if you're in a retail park, you might know what department store they're in. Wi-Fi will tell you what floor they're on, and beacons will find that person to within 30 centimetres. And then beneath that, I guess when you're right at that moment of purchase, it might be NFC, or beacon technologies can still be used. So it's really, I guess, the beauty of beacons is tracking someone right down to that moment of purchase. And so the common scenario, I guess, as you can see around here, is generally a retailer puts these things up on the wall, they start transmitting their presence, and if a customer who's downloaded the app is nearby, it'll ping up a coupon, or at the very least it'll start recording some information, so it'll get an idea of repeat customers and that type of thing. So yeah. And so what does the data actually look like? Well, the unit of currency for beacons is this thing called, it's basically signal strength, so it's very much the Internet of Things. This is like a really simple experiment. I just had a beacon, I had my phone on a desk, and it was really just putting the beacon close to the phone and putting it behind my head, and you can, a very simple experiment, but you can see here the huge variation in signal strength, and that really indicates, positioning of these beacons if you're setting out a retail store is, critical, and what you find is most people are actually putting things on the roof, to get that sort of accuracy. And the second experiment, this was like I had a sort of a poor man's Apple Watch, so I had a rubber band and put my iPhone on my wrist. It was like, well, we can afford it, innovation's tough, budgets are tight. So you can see along the green line was really just this idea of, I've got a notification, I've got a coupon. You can see just looking like that, you can see it's a very narrow band, really, really accurate for location. The blue line is, basically, taking the phone out of the pocket and putting it back in. You can see there's a massive variation, in where this beacon thinks you are. So, just an interesting experiment, and I think it sort of indicates that wearable technology and beacons are probably going to give really accurate data, and go hand in hand. So the data is complex. You're in And I guess when these beacons are deployed, and you'll have hundreds of them, you've got overlapping signals, you've got just a lot of noise. You've got people walking up and down aisles, you've got trolleys, you've got staff, and this stuff is complex, but it's really not. There's really no need to worry. There's a lot of startups, I guess, working on this, using a variety of machine learning techniques. And Estimo in particular has just released a new, I guess, SDK recently, a cloud SDK, and they can basically follow you in real time, through a cloud service, around the store. It's really impressive. Again, this technology is very early. It started with these standalone battery devices, but how are you going to manage hundreds and hundreds of stickers all around the store with batteries? Hard to manage, and it can run out of power. There's a software, you can do a software update, and they all stop working. So reasonably complex. So these things are evolving. So the next generation, we've got lots that plug into USB. They're on the power. So you don't have to worry about the battery life. And then, you've got stickers now. So you've gone from these fixed beacons to ones that you sort of can put on, shoes or, I guess, garments, and you can sort of get real-time, analytics. If someone's in the store and, picking up the handbag, that you can get analytics on that. What objects have been interacted with. So it's quite cool stuff. But, this whole proximity space is being fought over. I mean, there are other companies and other technologies. For instance, this is like GE and Philips. They're actually using the light bulbs themselves to, record proximity. And they can also beam information directly onto the phone just by flickering the brightness of the lights. It's quite clever stuff. But you've got to think these beacons. They're just sensor stickers. So one you can do the classic, which is location and distance and proximity, but you can add anything onto these things. It can be, again, motion, so people, picking up objects and interacting. It can be temperature. Could be air quality. It could be any number of sort of parameters that are sort of being passed, over the air by these things. So just to give an idea, a typical sort of app flow, if you're, developing around proximity. Now, this is, I guess, the classic flow. First of all, you start with a geofence, and you use assisted GPS or whatever to get your geofence. When someone's within that boundary, that's when you start triggering your app to start listening for beacons. You don't want to be listening for beacons all the time, otherwise your battery is going to go to zero, and I don't think people will like that. And then when we're in a specific beacon zone, so it might be, you're near the counter, that's when you can trigger other sensors. So it could be NFC, you could get more motion data. So you get this real tiered flow in terms of, if we're going to collect a lot of data on someone, which, it's always going to affect battery life, or there's always going to be something, you want to make sure that you collect the data at the right time, not all the time, otherwise the experience is bad. And I guess why the interest in this rapid evolution? I mean, these things are evolving so quickly, and currently the business cases are all somewhere 5 years out. So this is some research from ABI. So this indoor location market, which is a mixture of, I guess, asset tracking and coupons. No mention of actual data, which I think is actually more valuable, is set to be about 10 billion by 2020. I think an underestimate. Some other research around this whole beacon engagement. If you can know where someone is, and that I think we're talking about this sort of micro moment that someone's in, when they're about to make a decision or a purchase, or they're being influenced. If you can understand those and target your messaging around those, you get a lot more interaction, which is fantastic. On the negative side, the same research has found that if you deliver too many messages, and too many is like more than one message per store per day. Any more than that, it starts to become annoying, and you go from incredible uplift and interaction to decline and delete of your app. So it's a really fine balance, and I think this whole sort of like pushing tons of messages out and hoping could be a bit of a disaster. I think it's all about understanding that user. You've got to be very careful with this stuff. So here we go. This is like a small font slide, so I'm sorry about that. But generally there's a lot of challenges. Like we can see the promise, potential huge market. incredible data, but a lot of challenges. One, no one has your app. So you might have these beacons in store, but unless your customers are using an app regularly and you've got a wide customer base, you'll have all these beacons in place and you'll get zero data. The other is obviously, like Bluetooth. A lot of people have Bluetooth turned on, but some of our studies indicate it's rising very quickly with the latest smartphones. I think if you've got the latest version of iPhone, I think it's turned on by default. I think same for Samsung. The other, frustrating area is, a lot of retailers are very tentative about this technology. There's a lot of people are in sort of pilot mode. I think there's a sort of fear that, from retailers that the internet generation is going to come along and put these little things around the store and start aggregating this data and, getting this huge, billion-dollar valuation type stuff, and the retailer, makes a small amount of money. I think there's this general sort of tension about this stuff. So, in terms of some early solutions that people are, I guess, in the market are coming up with, one in particular, InMarket.com, is quite interesting. Their model is they create some code and that goes into third-party apps like Epicurious and WebMD. And what that does, it gives them this huge reach of phones that are listening for these proximity beacons. And in the States, they're claiming their reach is about 30 million people, which I'm not sure hasn't been verified. But that gives them the reach to serve, I guess, ads to a large. So they can put their beacons in a few stores, and they've got this huge reach. So they're bound to, you're bound to be able to target some people in those stores. And so I heard one example. This was around Levi's. They had their listening code in 15 million phones, and they were specifically looking at targeting a digital sign in New York. From that 15 million phones to the amount of people actually are exposed to that digital sign, it went down to about 3,000. And then I think down to a few hundred in terms of what they saw in terms of uplift of that campaign. But just gives you an idea of the huge reach that you need to make this sort of thing happen. So what we did is, I guess, in terms of just to try and find out what's happening with beacons within WPP. So I guess, and not just the market research side of Kantar, but also looking at all the agency side, just to get a feel for what's going on and what's hitting the ground. And I guess the early indication is that a lot of these projects are actually hitting the ground in the APAC region, which is really interesting. I get the sense that Europe and Australia, it's still in a very tentative mode. Retailers are looking at this stuff. Lots of pilots going on, but very tentative. And I think the US is similar. There are beacon deployments, but I think the large retailers are still being quite tentative about this thing. But there's so many pilots happening right now. Every retailer is in pilot mode. That I think maybe this year, maybe next year, you're going to see more of these actual live deployments. And I was sort of thinking, why is it that this APAC region, in particular China, are seeing these deployments? And it might be just this. I think in China, social media is a little bit different. So if you look at WeChat, there's this real, sort of cross between social and e-commerce that you don't sort of get in, I guess, in similar Western social networks. And in fact, WeChat has launched a large proximity marketing network using beacons. They call it sort of Shake Nearby. So basically, if you're in a mall and you want an offer, you shake the phone like that, and you can get a coupon or that type of thing. So it's like I guess a pull model of advertising. I've been reading in some forums. There's a whole lot of comments. Well, can't we just push them that notification straight onto the screen? Why do they have to do something? So there's a bit of debate about around that. So in terms of Kantar, I guess our first actual project on the ground was in China, funnily enough, and this was a typical path tracker project. So we had about 300 odd beacons around a hypermart in China, and we did again a typical path tracker study looking at dwell times, speed through the aisle, that type of thing. And I guess the data ends up turned into a heat map. And so typically from this path tracker, reasonably straightforward. I mean, we're really just looking at time in store versus spend. We pre-recruited people. I think there was a fear that, I guess, just with the technology, that people would push the wrong button, they wouldn't have the right phone. So we pre-recruited, and people turned up at the hypermarket, and we handed them the phone with the listening technology in it. And all the heat map and data analysis was done in-house. This took a long time. So I guess that the initial feedback from the team was quite expensive, but they're going to be doing more of these projects, and they're expecting these sort of costs to come down. The second sort of like project, again, APAC region, is through one of our WPP agencies, which are Wonderman. And what they do is they've, again, using beacon technology, but they basically built an iPad into the shopping cart. So if you're a premium customer, you get this sort of fancy-looking shopping cart made out of wood, and it would give you offers, it would give you tell you where the products are, and offer coupons and all that type of stuff. And obviously in the background, it's recording your path and what offers were of interest. And that was sort of rolled out in not just Philippines, but 3 other APAC countries, I think, like Thailand, and I think it went into Sydney as well. But interestingly, again, we've got the beacon technology, we've got all those problems of scale, and they've got around that by basically putting the tablet straight into the cart. You sync it with your loyalty card, and there's no need to try and deploy these things. So I think it's just sort of interesting. The first 2 projects have sort of avoided trying to get these things onto people's phones. But the promise of what you can do with beacons and proximity, is enormous. So I think, by combining all these different technologies, in a shopper sort of context, we've got time, we've got location, we've got movement. We're experimenting with adding wearable devices into this as well. So not only that, we get biometric data, we get action. We're doing a lot of work with wearable cameras and sort of machine coding of all the information and the sort of actions. You can combine it with purchase, and you can combine it with surveys, a huge amount of data points. Really, we're currently just trying to tick these things off and validate the data. It's complex stuff. And we've heard a lot about, this whole notification area. The background of this screen is a really cool startup called Batch.com, and their whole business is based around reporting on notifications. So if you're interested to see, what your competitors are doing in terms of the messages they send out, you can just go onto the site and find out and compare, your messaging with theirs. So, quite cool. But I think, that for wearable technology like the Apple Watch, this whole proximity messaging stuff really makes sense. So it's funny that this company I mentioned before in market, they've already got their little SDK app. So I think, and it's sort of live now, they've sort of, again, with a shopper list, they've tied proximity into their shopper list applications, and then, it gives you notifications, at the right time when you're in the right part of a store. So quite cool stuff. I thought I'd better mention privacy. This stuff's all very cool. But, anything to do with location, the word privacy comes up. And, I think it's not about, following the letter. It is about following the letter of the law, so I almost got that back to front. But even if you follow the letter of the law, it's just the whole PR thing around someone not knowing that you were basically following them around the store or following the location. So it's a very sensitive area. And I think this article is a company called Nomi, which specialises in passive location technology. They basically put some boxes up around the store, and it passively just works out. If you've got Bluetooth or Wi-Fi turned on, it starts collecting it. And they sort of got pinged, by the FTC because there's no real opt-out mechanism. People didn't really know that they were being followed. And, there was no rules. I think there might have been a small sign on the store that no one understood in the first place. This is one of the reasons. So these things are possible, but I think, the whole, privacy and consent and the information you provide to panellists or not to panellists is really crucial to make this work. And that's one of the things I like about beacon technology. It is a passive technology, but nothing happens till that person has downloaded the phone and accepted terms and conditions and decided that they're going to share their location. So, not perfect, but I think it's better than these, pure passive tracking. And I guess the final points of this technology is, be creative. This example here, this tide, it is basically beacon technology, but not quite the same as this constant ping. In this case, you click the button and it sends a Bluetooth signal to your phone, and it brings up Amazon, and you buy your tide. So that's just one example of how this technology can be sort of morphed into different sort of experiences. I think if you're doing mobile research, you really need to have a handle on what's happening with proximity. And it's cheap to get started an experiment. You can buy a box of beacons for $100 or less. So it's very easy to do small-scale experiments. You can buy some Blue Cat beacons. I think it's an Australian company, and they give you all analytics and everything. You can just put them around your office. You'll start getting data. Very easy. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for sharing with us about this great technology and as it scales. For me, there's a lot of passive stuff that you talked about, and you did mention surveys a couple of times. I'm just wondering if you have any kind of examples or thoughts on how surveys are being used with beacons.
Yeah, well, for all the beacon projects, we're still doing surveys at the moment. I think the idea is, again, it's complex data. So, I think the survey currently is going, hand to hand with this data collection. But the idea is to use that survey to, sort of validate this data that we're collecting as well. So, over time, I think, we had, 10 or 12 different sort of data sets you can collect, and we're just trying to validate which ones we need in the first place. Does it get to a point through biometrics and proximity that we don't need the survey? And, we're trying to tackle that question, but it's a hard one.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions from the group here? Okay, we got one from Ted.
I'm just curious on the example you gave in the China hypermarket. I think you said there were 327 beacons needed. How did you come to that number? It seems like a lot to me. Is it just a massive store, or do you have one in every aisle, or what type of beacons were used, and what was the cost of those beacons?
Yeah, I don't know the actual manufacturer of them. This was done through Kantar retail, but we used a third-party company in China to install the beacons. So there's actually quite a lot of testing to put them in the first place, and they needed that amount of, that number of beacons to get the sort of data and dwell in specific areas that they needed, and it was a large store. So what I know is typical deployments, typical coupon-based deployments, it might be 4 or 5 beacons you need. If you don't need to, I guess, get this accurate path data, it might just be 4 or 5. You have some at the entrance, exit, and in a couple of key areas of a store. But if you want to do a really detailed, I guess, that path tracking type work, you need quite a lot of beacons in place. When you think the beacon signal, for instance, it's quite hard to tell which side of an aisle someone's on sometimes, or beacons. So you need a couple of beacons, I think. Sorry, I sort of lost that one a little bit, but basically, just to get that data, you need a lot of beacons, but typical deployment would be about 4 or 5.